Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Thinking About the Full Stack to Create Great Mobile Experiences. Speaking today, we have Devin Cheevers and Susie Dirks, but first, let me go over a few housekeeping slides. Today's webinar is going to be recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to y'all tomorrow morning, shortly after the presentation. We also have a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to ask any questions in the GoToWebinar questions panel. And lastly, there's also going to be a brief survey after the webinar, so if you have any additional feedback, questions, and basically let us know what we can do better or we did great, that'd be awesome. Speaking today, we have Devin Cheevers, Mobile Product Marketing Manager here at New Relic, and Susie Dirks, Mobile Product Manager. And to kick us off, we'll have Devin Cheevers.
Thanks, Jackson. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. A couple quick slides on the background of New Relic. Our goal is to be the first best place to look to understand your digital business. We're really proud of our track record of innovation and releases. We have over 15,000 paying customers, which includes some of the best enterprises such as Dunkin' Donuts, Fox Sports, Condé Nast. In fact, that count is over 1,500 now. And we're also proud to have disruptive companies such as Airbnb, MLBAM, and Giphy that use New Relic to build great experiences for their customers. And this is the second webinar in a series around digital customer experience. And I think a lot of people on the call today are aware of this, but it's worth reinforcing the point that in a lot of ways, your product, your brand, and in fact, how your customer experiences your brand is via digital. You could say that the digital experience is now basically your brand experience. And we have some stats here from companies like MLBAM and Airbnb who are customers of ours. And the sort of volume of events and sort of interactions they're having per day with customers. Anyone on the call today that has a smartphone and interacts with companies like this, you'll know that you've probably shifted your behavior pretty dramatically in the last 5 years, maybe even the last year, to how you interact with just a huge range of brands and enterprises. It could be via mobile, it could be via browser, but it's increasingly via the digital channel. So what makes up this experience for your customer, this brand experience? Well, it's a lot of different touch points. It could be the mobile app, it could be a website, it could be in store. It is a continuum of experiences across different platforms. And if you deliver a great experience, you're going to see improved business results. You're going to see happier customers. But if something goes wrong, which, in the increasingly complex world of delivering these great experiences, there's just increasing risk that there's going to be failures. And if that happens, customers are going to use places like Twitter, social media, and they're going to be vocal about it. You're going to get a backlash. We've all heard of the recent incidents with airlines. We had an example here in terms of the Super Bowl. There's just a lot of pressure on you as leaders and practitioners in your IT organization to deliver continued stability and performance across your digital touchpoints. Today, we're going to dive a bit deeper into one of these places, which is mobile apps. So let's look into that. You've all heard this idiom now, I guess, that software has eaten the world, but in a lot of ways, you can make the argument that apps, and specifically native apps, have eaten the world. And we'd say that as a company, as an organization, if you are building out a digital customer experience strategy, which is critical for your organization, if you don't get your native app strategy right, you're losing the digital war. One data point that is reflective of this is we all know the increasing usage of smartphones in terms of consumers' daily lives, their daily habits, and how they purchase and how they interact with brands. And of that time spent on smartphones, 90% of it is spent within apps. It's a pretty incredible statistic. And so how do you take advantage of the fact that that's where your consumers are? You have to be where your consumers are. You have to give them sort of experiences in a device that they're using daily to interact with other customers. Well, we interact with and talk with a lot of companies across different sizes and different geographies over the last 4 years of running a mobile performance monitoring tool. And Susie especially has talked to hundreds of customers about how they're trying to deliver great experiences for mobile. And we've identified 3 key missing pieces that we believe organizations have an opportunity to do better, to capitalize on, and to deliver that better experience. The first one is this idea of shipping performance as a feature. You may have heard Apple talk about this at their WWDC conferences over the years, but they make the point, and we believe it's true, that as a product manager, as an organization, you're thinking about shipping features. You're trying to ship the next great feature, catch up with the competition, or leapfrog them, or just meet customer demand. And if you don't have performance as one of those features prioritized at that sort of level, you're missing an opportunity. And then the next 2 pieces are really like how, as an IT leader or organization, how do you deliver that feature? How do you deliver great performance? Well, you have to go beyond just thinking about the front-end layer, the iOS, Android, client-side layer, and you have to think about the full stack. And then this last piece, which is this idea of the disconnected team, this is a theme that you'll have seen across the board in terms of DevOps and other sort of methodologies that have evolved over the last, 10 years, 5 years. And mobile, in a lot of ways, can surface sort of the challenges within your organization about moving fast, about shared data. So we'll get into a little bit of how we think New Relic can help with all these layers, but especially the second 2 pieces in terms of operationalizing shipping performance as a feature. So let's quickly get into a little bit more of the arguments around why we believe so strongly in performance as a feature. Well, firstly, if you're not on the product or marketing side of the house, you may not have internalized this as well, but it's sort of a truth today for organizations trying to capitalize on native apps, and that is getting users into your application is a challenge. The App Store model is different to the web. The way that people discover applications is a bit different. It's a portal. It's a portal that has every single app in the world, and if anyone sort of thinks about how they discover apps, it's not really the same as sort of finding a website. And the net of that is like driving organic discovery of your mobile app is difficult and increasingly difficult. And then paid channels, there's so much competition for that attention for people's sort of primary platform, the smartphone, that we're seeing a dramatic increase in the cost of paying for an acquisition. You can see here the chart on the right, nearly 2x increase in cost. So if you're paying $3 a user, $3 per loyal user, so someone that's continually coming back to your application, that's a pretty significant cost per user. So you have to have a pretty sort of strong business model or ROI model around your mobile app. And sort of that's just sort of the first step, the first stage in building a great business. All of you are aware of sort of this idea of driving and retention within mobile apps. You spend a lot of energy shipping these applications. They're expensive to build. They're more expensive to maintain. So, a lot of research shows that most users are churning out of applications. This statistic shows that 90% of users on Android in this survey were churning within 30 days. They were just not coming back. And how do you kind of keep a user coming back? Well, as we'll get into, a big part of that is performance. And this is what you want to avoid. We've experienced this, we've all experienced this, and in such a competitive marketplace, avoiding the spinning wheel of death is sort of critical. And some more data to back up sort of how do we use performance as a weapon, as a feature to sort of address the discovery and retention problem. Well, App Store reviews are critical to getting people to click download. Half of those App Store reviews are because of app performance. What if you could have better visibility and better instrumentation around your app's performance and reduce the number of one-star app reviews because of a crash or because of slowness or because of some issue with the recent release? Well, there's strong evidence to show that that could have a pretty dramatic impact on conversion. So you see here this middle column here, moving from 2 stars to 3 stars, sort of, maybe it doesn't seem like that huge of a change, but this research shows that that could nearly 3x your conversions. So the amount of people that end up coming to your App Store page, your marketing team, your organization has spent a lot of energy talking about the app, promoting it, but how do you get the person from looking at the page, looking at the reviews and the ratings and the screenshot to hitting download? Well, if the ratings are high, you're going to see far higher conversion. And again, the argument is until you've really operationalized understanding how to ship performance as a feature, you're sort of missing an opportunity to increase those ratings. And then some more research around sort of engagement. So anytime you get a new user and they download your app, if they launch the app and it doesn't work for some reason, they're not going to come back. First impressions really matter on mobile, and here the evidence shows that less than 20% of users are going to try an app more than once or twice, and they're just going to leave, and you're not going to get them back. And finally, perhaps the most important metric, which is you all have sort of higher level business metrics around your applications. Maybe you're trying to drive increased revenue, increased retention, drive adoption of a specific feature or new product within your organization. While the idea of having an app that launches fast, that's stable, every release you ship, it continues to be stable. Well, if you can hit those sorts of KPIs, there's a strong argument to be made that you're going to just increase engagement across the board. So that's a little bit of background on the first part of the missing puzzle, which is shipping performance as a feature, and some of the arguments and some of the evidence behind why performance on mobile apps is just as critical as some of the evidence we've seen over the years on the web. So how do you think about it? Well, firstly, you need to be able to measure performance. You really need to understand in production what's happening in your application every day, weekly, monthly. You need to define goals as an organization on what you believe is the right sort of performance, and look to best practices guides such as ones from New Relic. And critically, third piece is how do you as an organization prioritize a bug fix or a performance improvement relative to other features? How do you prioritize a specific crash relative to shipping another feature or some other request from some other business owner within your organization? This is critical to have the data and have the ability for your team itself to be able to instrument the application and quickly, iteratively understand the performance of the application relative to sort of other sprint planning that you're doing. And then finally, this idea of repeating. So if you're thinking about DevOps, you're using DevOps, you're trying to increase the velocity of your releases, how do you have a tool that's easy to use and gives you the ability to continually measure, track, and iterate on shipping performance as a feature? Well, to get into a little bit more details on how we do it at New Relic and how we think our tool can help you do this, we're going to hand it over to Susie, our product manager, to walk you through the rest of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. So Devin just gave us a great introduction to the importance of performance as a feature and a bit more about, let's think about how we're going to actually implement this in perhaps some complex organizations. Because we all do want to make our apps better. But who owns it, really? Is it the mobile team? Is it the iOS developer and the Android developer who are working on the apps that own mobile performance? So that's something we're going to dive in to a little bit more. I have been talking with a large number of customers over the last couple of years now, and I'll actually flavor this a little bit with some of the conversations I've had with them about the ownership of mobile performance. First, let me talk a little bit about the makeup of a mobile app. A mobile app is actually a lot more than what's just installed on your phone. So let's go through that. We're going to talk a little bit about what is the mobile stack. What is the broader sense of what affects mobile performance? And then we'll go into a little bit more about the teams that are associated with that broader stack. So just looking at what's installed on a phone, you have the view that your end user sees. You have the presentation logic behind that, some business logic in terms of what to show, different data access components to pull the data that you want, and you have local data and caching to support that app. Does this look like I have a pretty good coverage of what makes up an app? So here's actually the more encompassing view of a mobile app. You have all those app side components like what I just mentioned, but you also have considerations about all the network calls that a mobile app is making. So those network calls are going somewhere, and they're going to back-end services. So they're calling different APIs, both like internal to your organization and third party in the case of different SDKs that you have as part of your mobile app. And those services are actually running on perhaps a very complex infrastructure. So this is really important to keep in mind when trying to improve mobile app performance. There are a lot of other components to consider. We recently had a customer who came to New Relic specifically to monitor the performance of their mobile app. They wanted to make their app the absolute best in their industry. Did they come to us just for our mobile monitoring product? No, they actually wanted to monitor all the different aspects of their mobile stack. So they did actually purchase our mobile monitoring product, but they also purchased our APM product and our infrastructure product and our synthetics product so that they could continually check the APIs that the mobile app depended on to make sure that they were getting back the responses that they wanted. So this customer, just to monitor their mobile app, was thinking about the full stack, everything that is associated with mobile. So that's one thing to take away, is to think about mobile performance and all the different aspects that do affect that mobile app. But this gets complicated because all those different pieces of the stack are actually owned by different teams. So then who really owns mobile performance? So I have to say, I've run into this conversation at almost every customer visit at some level. And I totally understand it. It makes sense. Mobile app development is a little bit off to the side of some of the other back-end development and work. There's often broken down communication across the teams. It's tricky. It's tricky to collaborate across teams regardless. But I've seen this come up even more so with mobile. So mobile app developers can only focus on the things that they can address. And at different companies, they have a different amount of control. If a crash comes in, maybe it is a problem in the app code, and then they can address it. If it's actually something where they're getting bad data back, they can protect themselves a little bit better against it, but in the end, it really deserves a conversation with the back-end folks and more control over preventing bad data. So there's a little bit more back and forth than perhaps is easy. And what I'm going to end up going through is some best practices to help this and to avoid a little bit of this, it's not I don't own this, I can't control this, it's not my fault that this is slow on either side of the game. So how many back-end developers would say they own mobile performance? Not many, because they are working on a lot of things, and they're working on things that are associated with different web apps as well. And they have a lot of different services running. They don't necessarily have visibility into how what they're working on impacts end users. So they don't have the data that they need to know, if I just make this one database query a little bit faster, that's actually going to help our retention. They don't have that level of visibility. And mobile app team members, if you're just completely reliant on some of the back-end services, you really need a conversation. You need data to share with them in order to actually say, hey, this is really hurting us and I need your help. So mobile is something that needs to be considered across the organization. It's not just a single team that can do this and make this happen. And I have seen customers really mature on this in the last year or so in particular. They're actually starting to hire people who are considering the full stack, and they have a mobile title, but they're considering the entirety of everything associated with mobile. And they're thinking about that when they purchase our monitoring products. Let's look at the whole thing, because everything is affecting our end user. As part of this, it is important to point out that there are some secret members of our mobile team. And those are back-end developers and operations. Those are the people who are running the things behind the scenes that the mobile apps are actually completely dependent on. So these are the three missing pieces of the mobile puzzle. The one that Devin talked about, performance as a feature, considering the whole mobile stack, not just the app code that's installed on a device, and thinking about the different teams that are actually part owners in mobile performance. So now we get to the juicy stuff. What do we do? What are some best practices to actually make this work better in our organizations? What can we do to make our mobile apps better without pointing fingers and saying we only can do so much? Well, there are a couple of really great tools, and I've seen great success with this here at New Relic for our own mobile apps, as well as at many of the customers that I've visited and talked through on this. So one key tool is alerts. Alerts are super useful if you can set them up in such a way that the mobile app team gets an alert, something's going wrong with the mobile app, but whoever owns the service that's associated with that problem also gets the same alert. Because then guess what? Both people are responsible and they have data that they can use to work together. And that pairs very well with dashboards. Once you get that alert, it'd be nice if you could go look at the same dashboard and understand the pertinence to both sides, to both teams. This is the effect on our end users, our user impact of these, for example, HTTP errors. And on the flip side, this is our service, and we can see the spike in our service that suddenly we have a bunch of errors going on. So there are a couple different situations where this type of conversation is very helpful. As I mentioned earlier, crashes do come up. It is useful to connect the full team for crashes. A lot of crashes are a bug in the app code, but a lot of them are bad communication back and forth with the APIs. So it's something to keep in mind. Response time is also super valuable. If you can tweak a couple milliseconds out of backend time, if you can look at some of your database queries or some of your transactions on the backend and make them just a little bit faster, your end user is going to have a better experience. So it's useful to look at the whole end-to-end response time. And the one that's actually probably the easiest to address and the one I'm going to dive into more are HTTP errors. So for HTTP errors, I'll go through some examples of alerts that you can set up and share across teams, and I'll actually walk through a live demo of a dashboard. For alerts, we actually do this here at New Relic. We use our own product, Synthetics. You can use other means to do this, so that we can actually make sure the request we want our mobile app to be able to make to a backend API and the response that we want to get back is always true. And so we can define that as an API check and have that just running as often as we want to make sure that those APIs are not only up and running, but they're actually giving back the information that the mobile app expects. So they're not going to break the app. The really cool thing about this is we can do this not only on production environment, so we can react really, really quickly if something does have a breaking change, but we can also set this up on our staging environment so that before an API, a backend API actually gets pushed out to production, we already know, hey, don't do it. We know that's going to break our mobile app. We need to look into it a little more. The key for this alert is based on the service that you're checking, the alert should not only go to the mobile app development team, but it should also go to whoever the owner is for that service. And in that way, you're starting to facilitate the communication back and forth. Another example that we use for our New Relic mobile apps is we define in the Alerts UI specific error codes that we don't want to see for a particular domain. So in our case, we don't want to see 500 errors for our login.newrelic.com domain. So we define that, and we make that a wake up in the middle of the night type of alert. And we make sure, again, that that alert goes to not only our mobile app team, but also whoever owns that login service, because there's something really wrong. We have a customer, this is in reference to my canary shown here. We have a customer that actually had an alert, this type of alert set up, and it helped them discover that one of their instances was actually down. So it helped them find a problem with their infrastructure, and they did it by running this alert on their mobile app. This was very valuable to them, and they considered their mobile app the canary because that same instance was also very critical for a couple of their web apps. So it actually had a much broader impact, but they did get the first alert because of mobile. So that's a few examples with alerts. Again, once you get the alert, you kind of want to have a shared place to go to have the conversation, to see if the fixes that you make are actually having a great impact, and so work on that together. So regarding dashboards, I'm going to do a demo. And this demo is around something that we released about a month and a half ago now, which is new data. And the new data are what we call mobile request error events that you can see in our Insights product. The mobile request error events include both HTTP errors, which are HTTP requests that come back with a status code of 400 plus, as well as what we call network failures, which means that there wasn't a response back to the mobile app.
Hey, Susie, we actually can't see your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you able to see this?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So here we have an example of an Insights dashboard. And in this case, we're querying a new event type, which is called mobile request error. Mobile request error, as I already said, includes HTTP errors and network failures. And the great thing about actually pulling together a dashboard like this is it can address some of the requests and needs that a lot of you have asked for over the last couple of years, where you can actually filter out what you consider noise. What I mean by that is you could say, I don't want to see network errors if they're the cancel variety. So if actually my app has declared I want to cancel this particular request because the user's now moved onto a different screen. Or if you want to filter out status codes of 401 across the board or for a particular domain, this gives you the opportunity to do that. Other things that you can do is actually look at users impacted. So something about errors, we actually get a lot of this from our Apple TV app. If one or two users are continually trying to ping your particular app with maybe a bad login, they can completely swamp your error rate. So what's really, really valuable is actually to figure out how pervasive are my errors. And so we do have this particular query set up to figure out how many different users, what percentage of my users are running into errors. Some other things you can do here, if you're familiar with Insights, is you can pick a particular app. So maybe you have an iOS app and an Android app, and filter to the information for that. If there's a particular version that's most active, in this case, it's our 2.8.2 version, you can filter to just that version. You can start to see which domains are having most of the errors, which specific paths, or you can actually pull the full URL. And here you can see the different status codes. So say you're only interested in 503, you could filter to just 503 errors. Or on the flip side, say you actually just want to filter out status codes of 401, you can filter everything out for 401 errors. So those aren't counted as part of your rate. And finally, you can start to do things like actually categorize all the different URLs into different services. And this is what you need in order to communicate with other teams and say, hey, we know that this service is having more issues than normal. There's a spike, it's gone above the typical error rate, and we can focus in on that. So let me show you a quick example of that. So we have a lot of different paths, but here I've grouped them to pull out those that are associated specifically with, in this case, tokens. So the folks that are working on our login service, I would have that conversation with them and say, hey, you know, what's going on here if we see a spike in that particular area? So there's a lot you can do with this. You can actually take these queries and also turn them into what are called NERQL alerts. So if you have a count, you set a threshold and you say, I don't want my percentage of users impacted to go over a certain percent. And if so, I want to know. I want to get an alert in Slack or wherever. And you can start to build alerts and dashboards that work across teams. So we talked about performance as a missing feature. We talked about at the bottom there, the forgotten layers of the stack. It's not just the app code itself. And then we also talked a little bit about how, in the end, mobile performance is actually dependent on folks outside the mobile app team as well. And so trying to get everyone on the same page to making a great user experience. So people across the stack are part owners in mobile experience, and alerts and dashboards can really, really help. So make great use of those. It's super valuable if you can really tune them, filter out what you would consider noise or what other people would consider noise using NERQL alerts, and then make sure that once you have that, the right people get it and are able to react very quickly to really make yourself have a stellar app. That wraps up most of the presentation. I just have a little bit of an epilogue here about recent features and what's coming next for people that are curious. So we did release at the end of last year crash analysis. If you're not familiar with it already, what it allows you to do is pull out, for example, one method or one file in your code base that is actually associated with almost all of your crashes. So you can really focus in on where to spend your time. You could also pull up crashes that are specific to one user ID, for example, by setting up a particular user ID as a custom attribute. And other ways to really prioritize and hit 90% of your crashes by figuring out, like, let's not just take things as they come in the door. Let's figure out what fixes are going to have the highest impact, and then move on beyond crashes. And then what I just demoed here on the right is the HTTP request error events and insights with that example dashboard. We do have a nice write-up on our forum, and we also have a blog post on this, so take a look for it. It has a bunch of example queries that you can use to create a similar dashboard. And finally, something that we have coming soon, which is probably super exciting to a lot of people, is what's called the crash event trail. And the crash event trail will show the events that we show in Insights also in our Crash UI, so that you can see, for example, the different network errors that happened along the way to a crash, and as well as any custom events that you're already tracking or that you might start tracking because of this feature, and what we call breadcrumbs. So we do already have a brand new record breadcrumb API available in the agents we just released, which is 5.13. And the UI is not yet available to show it, but if you wanted to get a little bit of a head start, breadcrumbs and custom events will be shown in our Crash UI. So go ahead, Devin.
Thanks, Susie. The first question was, do I get if I upgrade to New Relic Mobile as a paid customer, do I have access to alerts and insights? And I can start that the answer and say, with New Relic Mobile's enterprise SKU, you get access to New Relic Insights and alerts as part of your package, like come as part of New Relic's platform. So there isn't an additional cost to building these sorts of dashboards. If you want to have longer retention on the data, so if you want to go beyond a certain time frame, so depending on the category of data, for example, event data, you get 8 days worth of data with your kind of out of the box. But if you want to go longer in terms of the retention, you would pay extra. But if you sort of try out New Relic Mobile now and you decide to pay for the enterprise product, you'll be able to build dashboards and set up alerts at no additional cost. Susie, maybe one question for you I see in the list. How can I bucket a list of URLs so that I can associate them with the appropriate teams?
Great question. Let me actually flip back to that particular situation. So in Insights, very recently released, you can actually facet by cases. And for each case, you can do wildcarding so that you can say, if part of the URL, in this case, I use token as an example, is like token. So you can do other wildcarding. So if this is like, new relic, whatever, / you get the idea. You can do that wildcarding to bundle the different URLs by whatever service, however you want to group it. And then you can give it a name. And here, the way I did it specifically to show a list of them, but you could also do it as a where clause and just say, I only want to create a NERPL alert, for example, where request URL is like this wildcarded URL, and get a count, and then use that count, set a threshold, and then set up an alert based on that, or to do a time series chart that's limited to just that service. And so that would be a really good way to say, these are the two teams that we want to talk between, and this team only cares about their service they're providing, but here's a series of charts that are relevant to their service.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience. Are the new HTTP error events available now on my account, so as an existing user, or is this something that's dependent on an agent update?
Another great question. So the request error events are available now, but they won't be complete until you have the latest agent. So let me make that a little bit more clear. If you were to actually run this query right now, and you say select count, and this is specifically for enterprise customers, I should say. So for mobile enterprise, if you were to do select star from mobile request error, you'll see data. Some of the attributes associated with that data, like UIDs and session ID, will be missing because what we've done with our most recent agent release, I actually think it was 5.12 for this particular release, is made sure to always gather all of those attributes. So as soon as you start slicing and dicing, you're going to be missing information. So if you want to gather all the information so you're slicing and dicing like this dashboard so it works right, you should really update your agent.
Great, thanks, Susie. Another question. Do crash reports show the console log and call stack?
So the crash reports, I don't know if I totally understand the question, but we do show the stack trace. So that's pretty much the core of our crash reporting, and I think what folks would agree is super important. So you can see, from the stack trace, what happened in the code before a crash. Well, what I talked about with crash event trails is additional data that's actually looking at any request errors that happen before the crash as well, and any other custom events or breadcrumbs that you want to track the status of your app code before a crash. So you can add more to it, but it's a slightly different thing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions, so I think we can wrap it up now. Thanks everyone for joining today. There'll be a recording posted shortly, and special thanks to Susie for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.